chat, who wants to hear about the Final Fantasy XIV drama? Because we got some stuff. I do want to clarify, I had already intended to talk about this article, so the state of Final Fantasy XIV in 2025. It's in a weird spot, and this is by PC Gamer. I wanted to make a video about this, but I contemplated not doing this. And then I saw this post by VMimi33. And I really wanted to talk about it once I saw their post about this. For context, for chat, I am recording this right now, so hopefully this will go up soon. Otherwise, let's get into it. Remember to like the stream, guys. Please remember to like the stream. I greatly appreciate it. All right. Lingering snags from Endwalker has left Dawn Trail's early months feeling a bit strange, but the road ahead looks brighter. Oh God. Hold on. Whoa. Oh God. That's weird. Hold on. Anyway, we're fine. We'll make it work. Final Fantasy XIV is one of my favorite video games and has been for the better part of a decade now. But when I try and get a vibe check on where the game is at, the one word that constantly pops in my head is strange. It's in a rather odd spot right now, isn't it? It's a game that's floating in a weird limbo state, shackled to an aging design and a sluggish patch cadence. Their patch cadence is the exact same it has been for several years. Nothing has changed. While Final Fantasy XIV exists only through the context of negative press, yeah. Yeah, the patch cadence hasn't changed, buddy. At all. It had a moments of funkiness during COVID. But you know what? Fine. Despite promising some very cool things on the horizon, things that by the time they actually release, I fear may arrive too late. Again, it's their usual release cadence. Nothing changes. You impatient, content-hungry. Anyway, but I don't want to go all doom and gloom immediately. And in months since Harvey Randall took a look at the state of the game last year, okay, a lot of stuff has happened. It's a tale of two halves, one before Dawn Trail's release and the aftermath of one of the lowest rated expansions the MMO has seen to date. So let's take a look, shall we? Endwalker finished to relatively little fanfare. Bullshit. For the most part, the first 6 months of 2024 were awfully quiet. We had the final patches of Endwalker and the introduction of Wook-Lamont. I want to clarify here. When we first saw Wook-Lamont at the end of Endwalker, she was fine. She wasn't annoying. She had her quirkiness, but that was the introduction of a new character, and they wanted us to kind of get her quirkiness. They wanted us to understand what kind of character she was. Cool. I had no problem with that. We'll get to her eventually. Remember, you never hate journalists enough. Exactly. Folks were relatively excited for the groundwork patch 6.55 laid down for Dawn Trail, and our new Hrothgar gal was mostly well received after her initial debut. That will change, but like I said, we'll get to that. But aside from our new furry friend, the patch stories came as they went, in quite a muted fashion. Despite the main story wowing on release, that feeling slowly shrank into a bit of a shrug and I actually quite liked the introduction of Zero, the Reaper avatar from her longtime frenemy Xenos, but her story was very much a bottleneck episode. The point of the patch quests, the MSQ for the Endwalker patches, was to finish off the Final Fantasy IV story. The end of Endwalker was to finish the main story arc that they set up in A Realm Reborn. This, the patch cycle quests, the MSQ, for 7.1 through, sorry, not 7.1, 6.1 through 6.55 was to set up, sorry, let me rephrase that. 6.1 to 6.5, or more specifically 6.4, was to finish off the Final Fantasy IV part of the story within the context of the already existing 14 story, will also leading into what would be the new story arc. Again, 0 was meant to be basically Kain. If anyone's played Final Fantasy IV, you would know he started out as a Dark Knight and became a Paladin. Part of the story is Golbez and Zeramis. They're both bosses in the patch cycle. The whole patch cycle is proper Final Fantasy IV. So, okay, whatever. It wasn't a ball episode. It was to clear up loose ends before moving on to a completely different story arc. But I digress. She wasn't unpopular, but the relative disconnect between the narrative's past and future left the whole thing in a bit of a gray area, ultimately standing on its own, but not exactly standing out. Relic weapons wrapped up without much fuss too, due to how easy they were to complete. Check a few tomestones, which you get just for doing all your normal stuff, and a vendor, and voila, you have a weapon. Look, I will not deny that the relic weapons for the patch cycles were not great. They look great, but they weren't great. Endwalker was also by far the easiest expansion for obtaining a relic weapon. You just went over that. Literally just went over that. The biggest barrier to entry being the fact that you had to play through the entire Manderville questline, which has been going since the Realm Reborn. In order to unlock them, is weapons' ease of access a good thing? I guess it depends on who you ask, but the resounding feedback seemed to be that people missed having some sort of grinder challenge to tackle through the expansion's patches. Don't worry, they fixed that because the relics for Dawn Trail are going to be tied through the new Eureka and Baja-like content. Did Endwalker become Final Fantasy XIV's the equivalent to Marvel's Endgame? Yes, it did. Very much so. Which is why people are having a bit of a hard time, or at least this journalist is having a bit of a hard time trying to go through the fact of like, oh, this is that. Yeah, because Endwalker ended to the end of the whole light and dark story. And the patch story was like, here's a really good way to put it. If you want to like look into like Marvel as an example, it was the WandaVision of that. Like 0 was the main character. Because 0 was 14's equivalent of Kain. Not Kain, Cecil. I meant Cecil earlier, but anyway, Endwalker wasn't exactly the huge dramatic buildup of expansions past, but we knew that. Dawn Trail is the beginning of a new narrative arc, one with a greater focus on exploring new areas and cultures rather than world-ending threats. Did it live up to a decade of meticulous world building and character development? As of right now, no. But again, as you literally just said, Dawn Trail is the beginning of a new narrative arc. This is something that people can't seem to grasp when they say the story sucks. Don't get me wrong, I think Dawn Trail's story is kind of a stinker. It's not the greatest, it's not bad, but it's not great either. But again, it's the start of a new story arc. Let them have the time. It's the first expansion post Endwalker. Speak with Will Clement. The short answer is not really. Not right now, anyway. Live services that hit a termination point usually fail with supplementary content afterwards. D2, for example. Exactly. And Yoshi-P, the director of Final Fantasy XIV, has already come out and said they have the next few years planned. It's just we have to let them get there. They understand our problems with Dawn Trail. But instead, we need to sit and wait for them to, get through it. So a mediocre, normal for an MMORPG. Exactly. Anyway, Dawn Trail launched at the end of June, so June 2024, for those who don't know, to middling reviews. Resident lore enjoyer Harvey Randall lamented that the expansion contained a great story with a ton of potential, but it's told so poorly that it ruins the whole thing. That was a kinder assessment than what I most gave it to. Danella Lucas gave Dawn Trail a score of 80 in a review, but don't care because I don't trust anyone's opinions about that. Not tragic by any means, but also the lowest score PC Gamer has given out of the MMO's 5 expansions, with the second lowest expansion being Heavensward 87, the only part of Final Fantasy XIV to actually rank lower. Apart from its paltry original 2010 release, of course, was A Realm Reborn, which was awarded a 79. Let them cook. Well, exactly. And this is the thing too, is a lot of Bungie's devs have either been fired or let go for scandals. A lot of Square's, or at least the Final Fantasy XIV team, remains. And a common thing that people noticed with Dawn Trail, the lead writer for Dawn Trail was the guy in charge of the story, or the MSQ, for Baja. Anyone here who has played Final Fantasy XIV and has done Baja knows that story was fantastic, but that story was entirely shit hitting the fan from go. When Dawn Trail hit the moments of the shit hitting the fan is when the story really picked up the pace. The problem was getting there, and that's what their problem was. Oh, and Wook Lamont. I won't deny Wook Lamont is a problem. No, I'm not saying our reviews are the be-all and end-all of this game. Good. But it's a good brief overview of where the expansion has landed compared to its predecessors. The mixed reception has come almost entirely down to its narrative, with a sluggish story and characters overstaying their welcome being cited as some of the biggest issues Dawn Trail faced at launch. You know, Marvel also didn't maintain their talent after Endgame. You might be onto something. Exactly. And I want to clarify something. Shadowbringers and Endwalker, the two prior expansions to 14, had the lead writer for the Dark Knight and Ninja Quest lines, which people loved. Those are among some of the most beloved class quests in the entire game. Where did she go? Dawn Trail. Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, she was the lead writer for 16, which means they needed a different writer for Dawn Trail. So if you really want to blame anything for Dawn Trail, maybe blame 16. But I'm also okay with letting other writers have a go. I have no problem with that. It is not like these writers haven't worked with 14 before. They know the mythos. But sometimes you can have a fumble. And I would say that Dawn Trail has a fumble. The overall content for Dawn Trail has been fantastic. But the MSQ, I would say, it kind of flounders. It's not great, but it's, you know, I've played much worse stories in Starfield. It's essentially a Realm Reborn all over again, having to lay the groundwork and reestablish the stakes that will inevitably grow and evolve over the next several years. Except the game is already dealing with over 10 years of narrative baggage. It's never going to be easy to do something like that. Capture the feeling of new adventure in a game folks have spent thousands of hours into at this point. But the Square Enix seemed to miss the mark by a mile. While there was a multitude of issues, one name kept popping up across forum posts, Reddit threads, and a slew of negative Steam reviews. Wook Lamont. Yeah, remember our adorable Hrothgal from Endwalker's final patch? Anyone who's played even a few of Dawn Trail's quests will certainly remember her, because she's everywhere. She's stitched into every single narrative beat within the expansion, and we're just there to stand in the background and quietly nod as the story moves along with her. Her unrelenting presence has, to say the least, not gone down well with players. Videos, reviews, and discussion posts criticizing her and the narrative surrounding has permeated Dawn Trail's early weeks. She was only introduced to the game less than a year ago, and yet a recent analysis found that she ranked 3rd for most dialogue across every single expansion, only beaten up by the twins, Alphino and Alize, who've been present since the very beginning. Did they have an article for this? They do! Oh my god. Yes. Yes. Okay. So, this is the script analysis top 14 characters by lines by Rise Narukami. So, look at the difference between Aaronville. So the top 3 characters, that's not working, were Wook Lamont, Aaronville, and Cryle. Count of lines for Wook Lamont, 2,760. For Aaronville, 652. For Cryle, 742. Count of words for Wook Lamont, 35,019. For Aaronville was 14,135, and Cryle was 9,490. Rather big jump. Before it's over, I'll capture your heart. Criticisms around Dawntrail's story have stood in stark contrast to the reception to the expansion's actual playable content. Dungeons and raids have felt like a return to form for Square Enix, and players have pointed out how much better and crucially more challenging they feel compared to what we had in Endwalker. Healers were healing again, mechanics were catching people out, players were wiping the dungeon bosses. It's all basic stuff, sure, but it's something that had been sorely missed. The trivialization of Endwalker's fights is something the game's own battle designer admits the team went a little far on. A lack of any downtime for melee jobs took away from any real strategizing or planning they had to do. And what should have been hard-hitting raid wides and tank busters felt more like tickles for healers. Dawntrail's 8-player Arcadian raids have also been well received. While it's widely acknowledged that the Savage versions are perhaps some of the game's easiest fights, they're incredibly dynamic, unique from each other, and experiment with mechanics like Honeybee Lovely's slightly looser approach, with things like the heart meter and randomized tethers that have caught me out on more than one occasion. Each fight having its own unique song, something which isn't afforded to every raid in this game, as well as the voice-acted segments with the boss, as well as commentary, as you're canonically engaging in these fights as a form of entertainment like boxing or MMA. Brings so much life to these fights. In terms of spectacle, they blow Endwalker's Pandemonium series out of the water. Return to form, that statement glows. It does. Not gonna lie, this is kind of the normal situation, one main character, two supporting than the rest. The major problem people had with Dawntrail was Wooklamot was the main character, and our Warrior of Light, our character, the character you spent in the character creator, the character that you played from beginning to end, was a side character. And while some people felt okay with that to a degree, it should have swapped near the end of, like, you know, once the shit hit the fan, the main character should have no longer been Wooklamot. It should have been the Warrior of Light. And it wasn't. It was still Wooklamot from beginning to end. And it really hurt the final boss. There's also the first ultimate of the expansion, Futures Unwritten, which has gone down a trait with hardcore folks. It certainly helps that it's based on Shadowbringer's Eden raids, probably the most beloved in the game, but it mercifully toned down the difficulty somewhat from the nail-biting Omega Protocol Ultimate of last expansion, bringing a balance of theatrics and execution that my Ultimate rating pals have really enjoyed. Yeah, that crap is like, exactly. Like, I understand that problem. I had a problem with it. That's all stuff we've seen before, though. But Dawntrail has introduced a brand new flavor of battle content in its 24-player chaotic raid, meant to sit somewhere between an extreme trial and the first couple of Savage raids in terms of difficulty. The chaotic raid has taken the final fight of A Realm Reborn's World of Darkness Alliance raid and turned it into its own, more difficult encounter. The reaction has been mixed. Personally, I've had a great time with the fight, but relatively easy to learn mechanics and a balance between personal responsibility and wider checks to make sure the team is synergizing. But there are also pretty valid complaints to be had. There's a strict body check in the fight that essentially requires all 24 players to be alive, lest you snowball into a pile of corpses a mechanic or two later. Yeah, I do appreciate that he's talking, like, he's done ultimates, he's done chaotic. Like, I appreciate that. It's not just Cherno doing garbage. Like, there is a level of thought to this. Body checks can be frustrating when you've only gotten 7 other folks to worry about, but having 23 other players to account for has caused friction in more than one party I've joined. I think a part of that is down to the fact that there's a pretty healthy mixture of casual players and more seasoned vets trying to take on this fight, and the divide between two sides is clear. Scouring the forums, I've seen more instances of fighting between the two playstyles than perhaps any previous expansion. I understand the frustration on both ends. Things are pretty dry on anything more casual players can do right now, with more of the early patches dedicated to getting more difficult fights out the door to appease the hardcore Warriors of Light. But I've seen folks calling for Square to never do another chaotic raid, and I simply couldn't disagree more. I think it's a great in-between difficulty with crucially decent rewards. Some fine-tuning, maybe in a little more balance towards personal responsibility, could see people taking to the fight much more, I feel. Give the author a shout. Great idea. Where are we right now? Okay, I know where we are. So this is Molly Taylor. Oh, I was wrong. I kept calling it him. Sorry. That's a female name. Sorry. Yeah, Molly Taylor. Actually, you know what? Actually, pretty good work here. Where were we? Here. A new coat of paint. So hey, that's most of the core gameplay parts of Dawn 2024 out of the way. But Dawntrail introduced something else too. A graphical update. The first major overhaul of its kind since A Realm Reborn in 2023. There were some teething issues, literally, but the game looks downright gorgeous thanks to it. Characters have been smartened up and look less crusty, and Square Enix has been going back and adding new set dressing to its earlier zones to breathe new life into them. It's something I sincerely hope continues as we get more patches. Personally, I've never thought the game looks downright horrible per se, but I'll never say no to some plucking and pruning here and there. Admittedly, the game does look absolutely phenomenal now, you know, for a game from 2013. Another thing to get a bit of the visual overhaul was the die system. We've gone from a measly single die channel to two. Two, I tell you. The 2 die channels is pretty good. It's definitely been more valuable on certain items of gear than others. I don't think teeny tiny zips were the thing people were hoping to change. Square Enix, but it's opened up for way more creativity, which I'm always here for. So what's next? Here's where we are right now. A mess story, great battle content, but a continued content drought that has people growing and increasingly wary with the game. Because, and no offense to the incredible and hard work the folks over at Square Enix are doing, what we have right now simply hasn't been enough. We're almost 9 months into Dawntrail's release. My god. Oh god. With no steady grind to keep people like me coming back. Relic weapons are still a good couple of months away. For example, why am I waiting an entire year into the expansion that's halfway through its life cycle, by the way, specifically, to engage with a nice slow burn that I can tackle in a bite-sized chunks at my leisure? Compare that to World of Warcraft's most recent patch cadence, which Harvey actually went ahead and did, and came away shocked at just how slow Final Fantasy XIV has been in comparison. Dawntrail also seems to be failing in the same trap so far. Most of its content has catered for more hardcore players. While the Chaotic Raid was a great bridge between casual and seasoned players, the only other alternative has been Ultimate and Savage raids. Great for some, not so great for others. I don't think it'll impact performance on lower quality hardware, but that's something to keep an eye out for. Might gate out some more poverty-stricken player base. Someone who doesn't want to ruin their coworkers' access to this language. I understand that though, but at the same time, like, you do have the free trial from A Realm Reborn all the way through Stormblood, so you have that gateway. And then when you start paying for like Shadowbringers, Endwalker, and Dawntrail, by that point you might start feeling a little more comfortable to get into higher end content. And there are ways, like, you could unsync, or you can sync older extremes, older savages, teams like a Party Finder. There are ways to kind of dip your toes into the water. So, but I'm hopeful for change on the horizon. Patch 7.2 is set to release later this month. Specifically, we have a date as of writing this, because it wasn't revealed at this point. Veteran Final Fantasy XIV players had speculated that the release date for patch 7.2 was going to be March 25th, and Square has flat out confirmed that now. It is March 25th, so this upcoming Tuesday is the release date for that. And yeah, bringing about the thing I've been wanting so desperately since Dawntrail launched, the large-scale field operation Occult Crescent. So for those who haven't played 14, Occult Crescent is a field operation where it's kind of like a separate zone entirely that throws you at different fates. Anyone who's played Destiny, fates are like public events. But you have to you grind with other players, you explore the zone, you have its own specifically zone leveling system. So that way everyone is on the same level, and then it will have its own specific raid or dungeon kind of thing that you can't queue into. Like, you have to actually do it in the zone to do it, with its own rewards. It's basically a separate game altogether. And because of that, both Eureka, which was the Stormblood field op, and Baja, which was the Shadowbringers field op, both of them had the relic system tied to it, so the relic weapons. And we're already being told, as of now, that that is also the case for Dawntrail, which is great. A big old instance map that actually chucks challenging overworld enemies at me, gives me something to grind out, and makes Final Fantasy XIV feel like an MMO, like the MMO I sometimes wish it was. It's finally something to chip away at slowly, rather than a thing you dip into for a couple months once a week, and all of a sudden you find yourself dreading those Tuesday resets. Yes, for me, I will be spending a lot of time in Occult Crescent, which I'm highly looking forward to. There's also cosmic exploration, the more casual lifestyle content akin to Heavensward Ishgardian Restoration. Another thing to slowly tackle at my leisure, and something that'll break up all the hours I'm going to inevitably spend grinding. These are things people need, something to reel them in for small chunks of time every day or two to keep them engaged. Something that makes the drought feel a little less dry. Whether it's going to bang with the community is a different story, but God, I hope it does. Because if it doesn't, I worry it's going to be further cement the frustration that myself and many others are starting to build towards the game. I love Final Fantasy XIV, even in the times where the game makes it so hard to do so. And I'm desperately rooting for 2025 to be the year it can stand back on top as one of the MMOs I can't stop telling all my friends to play. I will never, right now, I will still never stop telling my friends to play it because I love the game. And yeah, so this is the writer. Good work. I actually do appreciate the article. It doesn't feel like just a piece for the sake of being a piece. So I appreciate that. But I specifically wanted to talk about this. So VMimi, and I'm not, if she does watch this, or I'm not sure. If they want to watch this, I'm not attacking them. When I read this the first time, I agreed completely. Final Fantasy XIV isn't on a downfall. It's just not flavor of the month anymore, and people's honeymoon phase with the game is fading. Oh no, a hit tweet. I mostly post Final Fantasy XIV art and memes, so if you're grumpy about the game, maybe don't follow me. But to elaborate, the term downfall is not just really the right one for the situation. It's just a normal ebb and flow of player counts that any live service game has. Shadowbringers and Endwalker were extreme highs due to their insane replicable circumstances, so that's more pronounced than before. But the game is not getting worse, which is the difference between this and an actual downfall. I've been playing the game since 2015. I'm sure some have assumed I'm a Shadowbringers baby or something, and have at least dabbled in most of the content. It's not all perfect, but for an expansion that's in its 0.1 patch, Dawn Trail is doing much better than the last few. I'm glad this has resonated with a lot of people, but a hit tweet has me like, oh boy. And I hope you guys continue to enjoy the game. And those that aren't right now, I hope you find something to do, whether it be in Final Fantasy XIV or otherwise. And then I saw this right before stream came out. I actually read down a little bit further and said, I find it funny that Dawn Trail has the potential to be the highest amount of content in Stormblood in terms of variety. The majority of negativity I've seen is against MSQ, or just people being tired of the usual Final Fantasy XIV roadmap. Like, people will be eating good as time moves on. The devs, to some extent, pride themselves on their routine, and while I get that's not for everyone, in my opinion, it's the game's biggest strong point. I'd much rather have a regular routine than a haphazard mess of high highs and low lows. Right? The consistency is king, especially for an MMO. The fact we're able to predict that they release this patch legit the moment a PLL, or live letter, producer from the letter live, I think is the specific term, time gets announced as a blessing. People can plan their lives, do what they want, and know the content is going to be there. And I completely agree. While it is annoying, the kind of content, like we are in a content drought for Final Fantasy XIV right now. That's incredibly true. Also, I'm just going to grab that. While it's incredibly true that we are in a content drought right now, we're only in a content drought because we've exhausted the content from the 0.1 patch, and now we're waiting for the 0.2 patch. Anyone who's actually played Final Fantasy XIV would know that Shadowbringers was running during the COVID era of time, so 2019 to 2021. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy XIV runs on a every other year. So, as an example, Dawn Trail released in 2024, June 2024 specifically, or realistically July, like early July. So, we won't be getting 8.0 or the next expansion until 2026, likely. Maybe 20. I'm thinking probably like mid 2026. So to say like it had a pretty staggering like jump in player base because people were already staying at home. People were either working from home or just home all the time because of COVID. So they needed something to jump into, and Final Fantasy XIV was there. And then Endwalker came out. And that was during a time period when World of Warcraft was actively shitting the bed. There was a point that the Final Fantasy XIV players, and hell, even the World of Warcraft players, were calling the WoW Exodus. World of Warcraft shat the bed so hard that players were moving over to Final Fantasy XIV. I saw, like, Asmongold is a great example. I even saw that he didn't forever, but he at least sat down and played the game. So to say, like, oh, yeah, we had a massive jump in players. You did, because of the time period. But we're not in that time period anymore. World of Warcraft is doing better. We're not in COVID era anymore. And we've already surpassed the new arc. We're in a completely new storyline now. So people are going to start tapping out and be like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. It's time to move on. But, and I want to do this as an example. WoW is also under Blizzard as well. Exactly, they are. So, 2019, right here, June 2019. So this is when this is when Shadowbringers came out. And notice here the gain of 21,945 players, or a 114% increase in their player base. So like their peak, and now this is on Steam. I want to clarify, this is on Steam. There are two different PC versions. It is the base original Square Enix version, and then the version on Steam. But the fact that we had a player jump up from 19,255 to 41,200 in just that time period is quite honestly amazing. And then, we start entering COVID, and, here we are. Like, and right around now is the June 2021, July 2021. We're seeing 40,000, 67,000. We're in the release here for Endwalker at this point. In fact, right around this time, I believe, was when Endwalker was supposed to release. And they ended up delaying it till December. December 2021 was when Endwalker released. Look at that jump. 95,150 players. 52,717 player gain. That's a massive gain. And of course, it fell off. We're down. We're getting down to like 29,000, but it maintained. So now let's look at July. July was Dawn Trail. We're at 73,000 right now. And look at where we are now. Like, we're at 24,000. We're still above. Like, we're still above Shadowbringers. You're right here. Like, this was Shadowbringers. Like, we're still this was Shadowbringers. We're still above the Stormblood, like 19,000. Which is fantastic. So yes, the game is in a downfall right now. From either people wanting to leave because the story's not great, or lack of content. But these numbers are still fantastic for your everyday MMO. So I don't see the problem. Like, there is a difference between downfall and dying. And as Tapeworm said, kind of like how Destiny 2 isn't dead, it's just not the only dog in town now. I would say if Bungie kept their course, Destiny has a very good chance of dying. But the team at Square Enix, specifically Creative Business Group 3, which is Yoshi-P's team, they know what they're doing. It's just let them have the time to deliver. We're only in the 0.1 patch of Dawn Trail. We're days out from the 0.2, And then we'll have Occult Crescent. We'll have Cosmic Exploration. Like, there's content planned from March through May. Like, we have a long period of time where it's going to just be content after content after content. Just let them play it out. I'm doing some tablecloth math, and they're still massively up overall. They are up something like 200% overall since 2020. Actually, it might be 300%. Exactly. So the game isn't dying. The game isn't going anywhere. It's people kind of bouncing out, people being done, people taking a break. I think that there's a quote from Yoshi-P, or at least a what's the right way to say it? A concept that Yoshi-P has said years ago, and said, if you're not feeling the game or you're ready to tap out for a bit, tap out. Go play something else. The game will be here when you come back. The content will be here when you come back. In fact, Final Fantasy XIV has a wonderful system where, say, it's not a 1 month, but if you put, say, like 2 months or more into the game, and then you don't log in for a full month, they just put your other month on hold. It stops counting down your days. Your account is literally on hold till you log in next time. That's not going anywhere. They don't punish their players for taking a break. So the fact that we're still up 24,000 and very well could be in a situation where players are like, I'll just come back when Occult Crescent is a thing, or a Cosmic Exploration is a thing, or our Relics are a thing. We could see a jump in player base literally on the 25th. Yeah, the game is going to have problems. We have people like Grums being like, oh my god, Wooklamot's horrible. Don't get me wrong, Wooklamot's horrible, and the actor more specifically, I won't get into that. But the game is doing fantastic. Is it doing as well as normal? No. But the fact the usual player count for this was like, 65,000, 42,000, 29,000, 55,000, not 39, 37, 37, 56. And I want to point out these jumps in players. So like 55, 56, 47, like these were patch jumps. These were patch days. Or more specifically, patch months. That was every new like point something patch. Like, as an example, like this was this was 6.0. And then 6.1. 6.2. Right? No. 6.0. So 6.0, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but the point stands. Like, the game has jumps in players every new patch cycle. Just because we're not in the next patch cycle doesn't mean it's going anywhere. Wait and see. We'll see a player jump in, days' time. It's just people have tuned out now. It's other game time right now. But once the new patch is here, back to 14, back to the grind. I don't know. Otherwise, chat, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my content, I would greatly appreciate a like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next video. Thank you so much. Goodbye.